Want to delve into the Dogma Tarot? Buckle up. This isn't your average deck. It's dark, edgy, and it's got people buzzing. We're talking interviews with the creators, a deep dive into their design process, and even a glimpse into the world they built through their video trailer. Someone serious about exploring the shadows.
And what's fascinating is the depth of their commitment. This deck was a decade in the making, fueled by these artists' shared passion for the macabre. They weren't afraid to explore those darker, often overlooked aspects of human nature.
A decade. Wow, this wasn't just a quick project for them. You could feel the dedication in every detail. The booklet we have details their process, from sketching to printing, and it's incredible.
They didn't just illustrate a deck, they built a world. They started with hand-drawn images, meticulously scaling them down to create these intricate cards, experimenting with different techniques to achieve the desired effect.
It shows. The limited edition printing, the high-quality paper, those silver gilt edges. Holding this deck is an experience. It's like holding a piece of forbidden luxury. Something whispering secrets you're not quite sure you're ready to hear.
And that's the essence of the Dogma Tarot. It's not about sugarcoating or offering easy answers. It's about confronting those uncomfortable truths that many traditional decks tend to shy away from. It's about exploring those shadows within ourselves and the world around us.
So, no pressure, right? But seriously, let's dive into how this darkness manifests, starting with the major arcana. Now, these are like the heavy hitters of any tarot deck, representing those big archetypal energies. What did you pick up on with how the Dogma Tarot portrays them?
There's a distinct shift from traditional interpretations. Take the Fool, for example. Usually it's about new beginnings, a sense of naive optimism. The Dogma Tarot flips that on its head, depicting the Fool as a revolutionary who has burned down the old world to make way for the new. It's less about blissful ignorance and more about a radical shift, a conscious choice to dismantle existing structures, even if it means embracing chaos.
Okay, so less follow your bliss and more take no prisoners. I can see how that might be jarring for someone used to a gentler approach. What about other major arcana cards? Did any others stand out as particularly, shall we say, dogmified?
The Emperor immediately comes to mind. The creators drew direct inspiration from Darth Vader, all about power, control, but with this chilling undercurrent of menace. It asks us to examine those concepts in a new light. What is the true nature of authority, and what are its potential consequences, especially when it goes unchecked?
That's a lot less benevolent ruler and a lot more ruling through fear, which is a pretty bold statement for a deck to make. But if we're talking about confronting uncomfortable truths, power dynamics are definitely up there.
And then there's the Wheel of Fortune. Traditionally, it's this almost whimsical symbol of fate, the ups and downs of life. But the Dogma Tarot doesn't do whimsical. Their Wheel of Fortune is a torture device, highlighting the inherent cruelty and randomness woven into the fabric of existence.
It's a far cry from those feel-good affirmations some decks embrace. It seems like the Dogma Tarot is less about offering comfort and more about shaking us awake to the realities of the human experience.
Precisely. It's about acknowledging the darkness, the struggles, the things we'd often rather ignore. And from that place of unflinching honesty, we can begin to explore those shadows and potentially find a new understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Okay, so we've established that the Dogma Tarot isn't afraid to go there, especially with the major arcana. But what about the four suits? Wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. Do they carry the same intensity?
They do, but each suit explores those darker themes through its unique lens. Wands, for instance, are typically associated with passion, creativity, action, that fiery go-getter energy. The Dogma Tarot takes that and gives it a rebellious edge. It's about challenging the status quo, fighting for justice, and exposing corruption.
So instead of following your passion, it's channel your inner rebel. That tracks with what we've seen so far. Do any specific cards come to mind that really embody that rebellious Wands energy?
The Three of Wands is a great example. In many decks, it's about progress, expansion, perhaps even a journey. In the Dogma Tarot, we see a serpent, often a symbol of truth and wisdom, entwined around a crumbling church.
Wow, yeah, that's not subtle.
Not at all. It's a powerful image, though, suggesting that true progress sometimes requires dismantling outdated structures and beliefs, even those we consider sacred. It's a call to question everything, to seek truth beyond dogma.
To topple the establishment, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Okay, that's Wands. What about cups? They're usually all about emotions, relationships, that whole spectrum.
And the Dogma Tarot doesn't shy away from the messier side of those experiences. The cup suit in this deck delves into the shadows of the heart, exploring love's potential to trap and deceive, and the ways in which our own emotions can lead us astray.
Because let's be real, love isn't always sunshine and roses. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, and downright painful. Do any of the Cups cards illustrate this in a particularly striking way?
The Seven of Cups is probably the most visually arresting. Instead of the traditional imagery of choices and illusions, we see buckets overflowing with beheaded people.
Okay, wow, that escalated quickly. What's the message behind that rather gruesome imagery? I'm picking up what you're putting down about exploring the difficult side of emotions, but buckets of beheaded people feels heavy, even for this deck.
It's definitely a powerful image designed to make you stop and think. It speaks to the danger of chasing illusions, of letting our desires control us without considering the potential consequences. The Dogma Tarot is urging us to examine what lies beneath the surface of those desires.
It's a stark reminder that what we think we want isn't always what's best for us. And sometimes those desires can lead us down some pretty dark paths. Okay, moving on from heartbreak to head games. What about swords? They usually represent intellect, communication, sometimes even conflict. How does the Dogma Tarot approach that sharp-edged energy?
If cups are about the shadows of the heart, swords are about seeing through illusions to the raw, sometimes brutal truth. They cut through deception and demand accountability, often challenging those in power.
So still rebellious, but with a side of no more BS. I like it. What's a good example of how the Dogma Tarot puts its own spin on that sword energy?
The Ten of Swords is particularly striking. In many decks, it depicts a figure lying defeated, 10 swords in their back. It's a card often associated with hitting rock bottom. The Dogma Tarot flips that imagery, showing us a figure impaled on the swords they themselves were wielding.
Ouch. That's a powerful image. What's the message there, do you think?
It's a reminder that our choices have consequences. The battles we choose to fight, the words we use as weapons, they can all come back to haunt us. It's a call for self-awareness and responsibility even, or perhaps especially, in the heat of conflict.
So, think before you speak, and maybe choose your battles wisely. Solid advice. Okay, we've covered wands, cups, and swords, that leaves of pentacles, often associated with the material world, finances, security, all that practical stuff. How does the Dogma Tarot handle those themes?
It's not afraid to get a little gritty. Pentacles in this deck explore the darker side of wealth and material pursuits, highlighting the potential for greed, corruption, and the abuse of power.
No prosperity gospel here.
Definitely not. The Dogma Tarot encourages us to examine our relationship with money and material possessions, how those things influence our values, our actions, and our interactions with others.
And which card would you say best embodies that exploration of the shadow side of wealth?
The Five of Pentacles is a perfect example. Many decks depict poverty or hardship, but in the Dogma Tarot, we see a religious figure urinating on a pile of coins.
Okay, that's not exactly subtle. What's the interpretation there?
It's a bold critique of hypocrisy, particularly within institutions that prioritize profit over people. It challenges us to question who benefits from systems of wealth and power, and how those systems often perpetuate inequality.
It seems like questioning those systems and the structures we often take for granted is a thread that runs through this entire deck.
Absolutely. It's not just about highlighting darkness for darkness' sake. It's about prompting introspection, both on an individual and societal level.
Okay, so we've taken a deep dive into the major arcana and the four suits. It's intense, it's thought-provoking, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But is the Dogma Tarot right for everyone? I'm sensing a but coming. But is the Dogma Tarot right for everyone? Because as much as I appreciate its boldness, I can see how it might not be everyone's cup of tea.
You're absolutely right. This isn't a deck for those seeking comfort or easy answers. The Dogma Tarot is for those who are ready to confront uncomfortable truths, to delve into the shadows both within themselves and in the world around them.
Yeah, it's definitely not afraid to push some buttons. So if someone is feeling drawn to this deck, intrigued by its darkness, but maybe a little intimidated, what would you say to them?
I'd say trust your instincts. If this deck calls to you, there's a reason. Don't be afraid to explore those darker aspects, to sit with the discomfort it might evoke. It's in those uncomfortable spaces that we often find the most profound insights.
It's like the creators are handing you a flashlight and saying, okay, ready to see what's lurking in the corners of your subconscious.
Exactly. And they're not holding your hand through the process. They're empowering you to find your own meaning in the darkness, to challenge your assumptions, and to emerge transformed.
Which is a perfect segue to my next thought. While we've been talking about these cards in pretty abstract terms, I think it's time we get a little more concrete. Let's talk about some of the specific imagery that really brings those darker themes to life, because, let's be real, these images are hard to forget.
They certainly are. The Dogma Tarot doesn't shy away from the grotesque or the unsettling, But again, it's not about shock value. It's about using those intense visuals as a catalyst for deeper reflection.
So what are some of the cards that really stuck with you, visually speaking, the ones that you see in your mind's eye long after you've put the deck away?
The Ten of Pentacles is a good example. In many decks, it represents wealth, family legacy, that kind of stability built over time. The Dogma Tarot flips that on its head, depicting a scene of utter chaos, an ultra riot unfolding amidst burning buildings.
So not exactly the peaceful family gathering we might expect. What's the message there, in your opinion?
It's a stark warning about the potential consequences of unchecked greed and inequality. It's a reminder that those seemingly unshakable structures, those institutions that seem built to last, can crumble when their foundations are compromised.
Which feels incredibly relevant right now, wouldn't you say? Especially with so much economic uncertainty and social unrest in the world.
Absolutely. The Dogma Tarot, despite being years in the making, has this uncanny ability to reflect the anxieties of our current moment.
So it's like they tapped into something in the collective unconscious. Speaking of unsettling imagery, the Five of Pentacles also comes to mind. That image of a religious figure urinating on a pile of coins is not easily forgotten.
It's a powerful image and a pretty blatant critique of hypocrisy, particularly within institutions that prioritize profit over people. It forces us to question who benefits from systems of power and how those systems often perpetuate inequality.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the more, shall we say, challenging imagery. What about the cards that are just plain cool? Because even with all the darkness, there's a visual style here that I find really captivating.
Absolutely. The Dogma Tarot showcases the power of black and white illustration, the stark contrast, the intricate details. It creates an aesthetic that's both haunting and beautiful.
Yeah, it's like those images just burn themselves into your brain.
Yeah.
The Knight of Wands is a good example. Traditionally, it's a figure of action, courage, maybe even a bit of bravado. How does the Dogma Tarot portray that energy?
There's no gallant knight riding into the sunset here. The Dogma Tarot's Knight of Wands is a bringer of chaos, a figure consumed by flames, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake.
Okay, so less onward to glory and more burn it all down. What's the takeaway for someone pulling that card in a reading?
It's a call to embrace change, even if it feels destructive. It's about recognizing when old structures and beliefs are no longer serving us, and having the courage to tear them down, even if it means facing chaos and uncertainty.
It's interesting how that theme of destruction as a catalyst for creation keeps coming up. It's like the Dogma Tarot saying, sometimes you have to break things down to build something new, something better.
Exactly. It's about transformation, about confronting the shadows within ourselves and in the world around us so that we can emerge stronger, wiser, and more aligned with our true selves.
So to wrap up our deep dive into the Dogma Tarot, I think the question isn't just whether this deck is right for you, but rather, what will you discover in its shadows? This is a deck that invites you to look inward, to examine the world with a critical eye, and to embrace the transformative power of confronting uncomfortable truths. Remember, sometimes the most profound insights are found in the darkest corners.